Hello and welcome to Paul on Politics. Now, after last week's budget, the Prime Minister has reinforced her flagship education policy to allow a new generation of grammar schools. She says it will improve social mobility, giving poorer, brighter children a better chance to access grammar schools. And it has certainly pleased her MPs, not least in Kent, which has the highest number of selected schools anywhere in the country. But has she done her homework? Amid reports that grammar schools may be told to admit children with lower 11 plus scores, we'll be discussing if social engineering is the answer to social mobility. And with county council elections on the horizon, should we be considering whether limits on the length of time our councillors should serve? With me on the red sofa to discuss these issues are Gordon Cowan, who leads the Labour group at Kent County Council, and Professor Tim Luckhurst at the Centre for Journalism at the University of Kent. Thanks to both of them for joining us. First, Boglarka Kostolani gauges reaction to the latest developments in the grammar school debate.
Although Philip Hammond has already started backtracking on some of the promises he made in the spring budget last week, it seems the controversial issue of grammar schools is here to stay. The Chancellor announced a £320 million fund for 110 free schools and grammars. The government is also considering a radical plan in order to improve social mobility. Grammar schools could be required to adopt a quota system for brighter children from poor backgrounds, and they could admit at 12 and 13 to reflect the fact that children develop at different ages. Jenny Whitlow, the chairman of the Grammar Schools and Social Mobility Select Committee, believes that it would be wrong to only focus on grammar schools.
We have to look at the role of Kent County Council and those school improvement advisors who work with primary schools to see how children from poorer backgrounds are really being stretched and pushed using the pupil premium. We mustn't see the issue of where we've got high attainers from poorer backgrounds missing out in a grammar school place because they've slipped through the net, because the parents perhaps haven't had a good experience of education themselves or feel intimidated by a grammar school environment.
In Kent, only 3% of children on free school meals attend grammars, in contrast with more than 13% in non-selective schools. A little bit over 6% of pupils attending grammar schools receive pupil premium, compared to almost 27% in non-selective schools.
We recognise that for many parents, the cost of travel can be a barrier to exercising that choice. Pupils typically travel 3 times as far to attend selective schools, so we will extend free school transport to include all children on free school meals who attend a selective school, because we, Mr Deputy Speaker, are resolved that talent alone should determine the opportunities a child enjoys.
However, Phil Carnevas, the head teacher of Canterbury High School, believes that social mobility should not be the reason for opening more grammar schools.
It is disingenuous, I think, to suggest that grammar schools should be used as a vehicle for social engineering. If you want to socially engineer, there's a better way of doing it, which is to abolish all the grammar schools, introduce a fully comprehensive system, and then ensure that in each comprehensive school you have an equal distribution of ability, and if you wanted, an equal distribution of social class across the whole of the country, so that everybody had the benefit of a good school.
Boglarka Kostolani for KMTV.
Well, Gordon Cowan, if you want a radical shake-up of grammar schools, lower test scores perhaps for poorer, brighter children might be the answer. What do you think?
No, I think from the Labour's point of view, we've always been against building new grammar schools. We've always been against the 11 plus, quite simply because that is taken at the age of 10. And at the age of 10, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to pass a test to go to a grammar school. So often that child fails, and then the life is finished at the first hurdle. And therefore, in terms of test scores and lowering them and trying to get more people into grammar schools that way is not really the right thing to do.
Tim Luckhurst, Michael Wilshaw, the former Ofsted inspector, said grammar schools are stuffed full of middle-class kids. If you want to change that, you've got to do something pretty radical, and Theresa May's suggesting something pretty radical.
Well, I'm going to suggest something radical for a start, and that's let's not misrepresent history. Labour Party always opposed to grammar schools. It was the 1945 Labour government which created grammar schools, and Ellen Wilkinson, the great Secretary of State in that Labour government, a politician I admire enormously, who said that she remembered what it was like being taught in a mixed ability class in Manchester and hated it.
That's
so let's
the history
get that
lesson.
right.
So
yeah, important. Labour created grammar schools. What should we do now? We should introduce selection on a fair basis. I agree with Gordon. You select at 13, not at 11. If you select at 11, you get a totally distorted population in the grammar schools. More girls pass than boys, so you have to set a lower score for boys, because otherwise you'd have a 75% female cohort. So selection at age 13. And let's not forget that there is powerful evidence that amongst those pupils who do go to grammar schools, performance is greatly enhanced, and that is most notable in children from poorer homes. So I think that grammar schools have a great effect on social mobility. The problem with grammar schools is, what do you do with the children who don't get in? And that's a problem that has never been seriously addressed.
Well, social mobility, we keep hearing this phrase and these arguments around it. Social mobility is not just about what happens to grammar school intakes, it's what happens to the intakes of all schools.
Well, let's not forget that grammar schools helped a very, very substantial population of very bright children from poorer homes to achieve things which they wouldn't otherwise have achieved. Should we forget about those who are left behind? No, of course we shouldn't. We should, in fact, go back to that history lesson, Paul, and you can lecture me as much as you like, but history is a great teacher. What was proposed in 1945 was a tripartite system: grammars, technical schools and secondary moderns. It was never created. Had it been, we would have education fit for purpose for all of our students.
I think what we've got, though, is the non-selective schools that have grammar streams within them. And I think that's the answer, because putting that child in front of a test at the age of 10 is totally wrong. Now, if you put them into a non-selective school where there's a grammar stream where that child can move into that stream once it's reached that ability, so it's got the skills as it goes through, then of course that really is the prime answer of getting it right.
You're describing the school I went to, Gordon, a comprehensive school with a grammar stream, and I saw the sheer misery of it for the children who were trapped by peer group pressure from their cohort not to perform well at school. The beauty of grammar schools is that they take children out of an environment in which they're encouraged to underachieve and place them in an environment where they're encouraged to achieve their very best.
That's a bit of a slur on those non-selective schools. You say you're taking them out of an environment where they're not flourishing.
There's a great deal of powerful research to back this, Paul. If you take people out of an environment in which they're encouraged to underachieve and place them in an environment in which there is real peer group pressure to achieve, it does greatest good for those who most need that support. Are you saying
all non-selective schools have got this culture of underachievement?
I'm saying that the type of school that Gordon's just described, which is exactly what I attended in People's High School in the south of Scotland in the 1970s, had exactly that consequence. It's something that I found really depressing. There were very few people going from my school to university. Should have been many more, but those children who did not come from homes in which they were encouraged to achieve found that the environment at school didn't encourage them to do their very best, and I want to achieve that.
You've obviously picked up a school that, unfortunately, that you demonstrated that wasn't quite right. If I take the Bradbourne School in Sevenoaks, the wilderness site closed. Michael Cove came along and said we want to put a free school on there. Then Paul Carter, the leader of Kent County Council, said we can have 2 schools on there and we'd like a grammar annex, which in my mind was a grammar school. And I visited that wilderness site. I also visited the Bradbourne School, and the headmistress took me around there. And I'll tell you, it was a joy for those children who was in that grammar stream that said they really enjoyed it. They were getting the right education, they were going in the right way, and therefore the education had really increased and benefited them much more in that grammar stream, and there was no pressure. It was the only pressure was on them was the pressure of them moving forward in their time, ready to get more education and ready.
I think we're both seeking the same objective. I think we're both seeking to achieve the best for children who really can achieve excellent results, and good education for those who have different sets of aptitude. But I think the evidence is overwhelming, not just from this country, but from around the world, that selection, which is of course a natural and absolutely constant phenomenon throughout our lives. We select for jobs, we select for university, and perversely, there is this bizarre argument that we shouldn't select at school. Children should learn early on that you get the sort of education which suits your needs and suits your development. And I want that for all of our children.
Do you think quotas are a good idea, Tim?
Yes, I do think quotas are a reasonable idea because I think they balance up the social intake to grammar schools, and I think that grammar schools are an excellent idea because the real alternative to selection by ability is selection by parental income, and I'd rather have selection by ability.
Perhaps we could take a look at Kent and the areas where we might see attempts to create new grammar schools. There's quite a few different areas. One of the things that strikes me, Gordon, is that the government seems in its desperation to appease those who don't like grammar schools is imposing various conditions on these new grammars to work with another school, accept pupils at different ages. And you can imagine some grammar schools saying, do I really want this kind of hassle?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the Prime Minister's made it clear that on new schools that's going to be built, that they're always either a free school or an academy now. And there's going to be the ability for those schools to convert to grammar schools. Now, my understanding is that legislation's got to be put through yet, but that is their idea. And for me, that is totally wrong. In terms of the schools, like I say, just putting schools in and saying, right, you're now a free school, so therefore, what it is, a free school or an academy is a sponsorship by various people that sponsor them schools to go forward, and then we're going to convert them directly into grammar schools. Now, that is not the answer, because when you're converting them into grammar schools, you're getting away from the one thing you said, Tim, about a test. You say it should be selected in terms of a test. You've got away from that straight away because you've actually converted them directly into grammar schools. Right,
well, obviously grammar schools is a debate and an issue which is not going to go away, but we've got to move on to our next class. So, 5 Conservative councillors will be retiring in May when the elections come around, and there's nothing particularly unusual about that. But what is interesting is that between them they have served a staggering 116 years on the county council. So should we be considering limits on the length of time councillors serve, or should we be valuing their experience? Lucy Norris reports.
At the moment, councillors and MPs can be re-elected indefinitely.
Right.
So I was wondering whether you think that's fair or not, or whether that should be changed and whether they should have fixed terms applied.
Yeah, they should have fixed terms applied, like the presidents, like the prime ministers and things like that. Then new ideas, they can come in and they can actually make a change.
They should have their term once they've been voted in, and then after how long their term is, I don't know. They should be then another vote for somebody else. I don't think it should be an indefinite MP all the time, no.
I don't think it's fair. I think they should have fixed terms. But I also think that whoever's in office, they lie anyhow. Nothing ever changes.
They might not be very good. So if they're not up for re-election, they can just stay in office for as long as they like. I mean, I think some of the councillors are rubbish, really.
I think sometimes you get people they get stuck and they don't actually, they're not talking about the people anymore.
In my opinion, get rid of the old lot and start all over again. Because they all say they're going to do this, they're going to do that, and they don't do it. So just get rid of the old lot of them, start again.
Well, Gordon Cowan, are you going to be a turkey voting for Christmas? Do you think the idea of fixed terms for councillors deserves some merit or some discussion?
No, I think you've got to look at the whole stretch of a person that becomes a councillor. I've been a councillor for some 27 years now, at all levels, and I still serve at all levels, at town, at district and at county. And I believe that my experience comes across very well in the chamber. And people appreciate the experience being there. However, what I would say is this, that we are always looking for new, young, up-and-coming councillors to become councillors. But every time you go out the party door and trying to attract new people to councillors, there's not a lot of people out there that so wish to take that experience on. It's a shame, because I think up and coming new councillors is something that as a Labour Party we're promoting as much as we can to get as many new councillors through the door as possible.
Tim Luckhurst, there are some parts of Kent where if you become elected a councillor, you've got a job for life, effectively.
Well, I think that's wrong, but I don't think that term limits are the answer. I think that the decision as to who should represent them on a council or indeed in Parliament should be left to the electorate, and below that to party members. After all, there are two mechanisms by which people can get rid of elected politicians they don't like. They can vote for somebody else at an election, or they can join a political party and select somebody else to stand. And I think that's perfectly appropriate. If you get rid of experience, what you tend to do is allow the bureaucrats, the civil servants to take over. And I think that's undemocratic. And there are many examples around the world, for example, in America, where term limits were proposed for the House of Representatives, it was rejected on the basis that it would probably lead to dominance by the bureaucracy. And I think that's a real fear. So leave it to the people.
Well, Gordon Cowan, we know the merger of some East Kent councils is on the horizon. And one of the arguments they're making is, as a positive argument, is that it will lead to a reduction in the number of councillors.
Absolutely. Well, let me first say about the super council of 4 within the east of the county. Certainly as a Labour group at District Council, we are going to vigorously oppose that. If we're going to go down the line of super councils, what we'd like to see is unitary authorities. Unitary authorities will pick that up.
Do you support the idea of fewer councillors in this new merged authority if it comes about?
Well, I think it's going to be difficult because the larger the authority, the more councillors you would hope that, in theory, you would hope that you would need. By cutting and slashing the number of councillors, it's a much larger area for them to get around. And the people are saying they never see their councillor. Increase that space by another 5 or 10 miles radius, which in some ways you can do on this. It's now going to say, well, where's my councillor even more?
Tim Luckhurst, a fair point there. People do like visibility of their elected representatives, and if you reduce the number, then that visibility and access
I think that's absolutely fair. I also think it creates competing mandates. The larger you make a council ward, the more it becomes like a constituency, and you start to have arguments about who's representing it most effectively, the MP or the councillor. I think that we need levels in politics. I think we need really experienced councillors in all sorts of roles, and actually experience can do a great deal to improve the efficiency of a council and to enable the councillors to lead and not to allow their public servants to lead them. So I'm actually very much in favour of politicians like Gordon. He's been elected by the people. He's not serving because of some bureaucratic incentive to do so. He's there because he's winning elections. That's fine.
Well, one thing, Gordon, I always note when I go into the council chamber at County Hall is the number of men in grey suits sitting there. Why aren't there more women and in the council?
Well, you've got to ask that. It's a very good question, but again, certainly in the Labour Party, and I think certainly the Tory Party as well, I could say that we're trying to encourage as many.
It's not seen as an attractive proposition for a lot of people, though, is it?
No, but it being a councillor is a damned hard job. Believe you me. You know, getting round to the constituencies, doing the constituency work. On top of that, being at all those meetings, that you need to get the policies hopefully carried through. We're constantly trying to push for more women. I mean, on anything that we do in the Labour Party, we try to look for a 50-50 place of 50% women, 50% of men.
Final quick point from Tim.
Isn't that the solution? Parties should make sure that in their selection process they're looking at equal numbers of male and female candidates, and they should take responsibility for ensuring that equal numbers of male and female candidates get through. That's a job for the parties and for the party members.
Okay, well, we'll have to end the debate on that there now. Finally, we wanted to look at the impact of the election expenses saga, which is boiling up nicely for the media. Is there a real issue that the Conservatives have got to be worried about this, Tim?
Yes, I think the Conservatives have got to be genuinely worried about this. There appears to be, and it's a matter for the CPS to decide whether or not to prosecute, real evidence in several constituencies, including here in Kent, that election expenses may have been inappropriately claimed and that deserves proper scrutiny. I think the best way to scrutinise that is through the law. And let's face it, Britain has a global reputation for having pure, uncorrupted politics. Any evidence that our politics are not uncorrupted needs to be properly investigated because it is hugely damaging to our reputation.
Gordon Cowan, some people would say all the parties are at it with their battle buses and piling in activists in marginal seats.
You can say
not just a Conservative problem.
You can say that, of course, but expenses. All parties know the levels of expenses they can use on these elections, and each party knows exactly how much they've used for those elections in the past. Now, I'll say this: whether it's the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, as it is now, they must make sure that they keep within the law. And if they break the law, then they've got to face the consequences that the law brings to them. And the CPS are seriously looking at this situation now, and we have to wait and see what comes out of it. But this is the largest, I think, the maximum fine that you could have against a Tory party, Tory government in actual fact.
Well, the Electoral Commission was saying actually it might have implying that it might have liked to fine them a bit more actually, but it was constrained by the regulations.
Of course, this is the fine to the party. Individuals would have to face trial in court if there were to be charges brought. But yes, the Electoral Commission's power to fine parties which misbehave electorally is actually rather limited. It had to put together a collection of rather smaller fines to get to the total 70,000. I think it should be able to fine a party a great deal more than that.
Looking ahead, and we should stress that the Conservatives have denied any wrongdoing. Do you think Nigel Farage is going to stand again, Gordon?
Nigel Farage, it wouldn't surprise me whatever he did, and yes, I wouldn't be surprised if he was to stand again in Thanet.
Now, there was some suggestions in the 2015 election that some of your supporters might have held their nose and got into the polling booth and put a cross against the Conservatives in order to keep Farage out.
Well, that's news to me. Certainly my supporters and my people out there, I can't tell each electorate what to put on the ballot paper. It's their choice. But certainly from our Labour Party, activist part, certainly that wouldn't have happened. We didn't do a scheme to try and keep Farage out and put McKinley in, that was for sure.
There hasn't been a prosecution brought yet. If there were a prosecution brought, it does not necessarily guarantee a by-election. The court would have to conclude not only that there had been criminal conduct, but that it had distorted the result of the election. There's a long way to go before that. We're not going to see Nigel Farage standing for election this week.
Okay, well, I'm afraid time is against us. We'll have to wrap up there. Thanks to our guests tonight for coming into the studio. We'll be back soon. In the meantime, you can catch up on all the latest political news in Kent by logging on to kentonline.co.uk or listening to KM FM or following me on Twitter @PaulOnPolitics. See you soon.